In today's episode, where the Spurs stand at All-Star break, both team and player analysis, recapping All-Star weekend, and previewing the upcoming 3 games for this upcoming week. All right, so it's been about a week since I last recorded an episode of the Spotted Pod. I don't want to go too much into detail about the games from last week just because they were pretty far away at this point as I'm recording on Monday evening. Just to recap real quick, last Monday the Spurs were on the road at Washington. They ended up beating the Wizards, though Washington did get it down to crunch time. Wemby and Fox took over there in the fourth quarter and in crunch time, with Wemby scoring 31 points and De'Aaron Fox adding 30 points in that game. Then on Wednesday, the Spurs were on the road at Boston, and the Celtics won by 13 points. The Spurs basically struggled to start the game, down by 18 at the end of the first quarter. They end up winning the next 3 quarters, but Boston basically walks away with a comfortable win. And the Celtics' three-point shooting and rebounding were the big issues for San Antonio's defense on that night. So again, I don't want to go too much into detail on those 2 games just because they were pretty far away at this point on Monday evening. So let's begin, though, with the first topic, which is where the Spurs stand at the All-Star break from both a team and player analysis perspective. So regarding the team, right now they are 23 and 29 overall, so 12th out west still. They're 3.5 games behind the Golden State Warriors, who are 28 and 27, holding that 10th spot out west. Now, if the Dubs or anyone who out west who ends up in 10th, let's just say they end up winning 51% of their games by the end of the year, that means they're going to finish with a record of 42 and 40. What does that mean for the Spurs? That means that if those teams, whoever ends up 10th, ends up going 42 and 40 by the end of the year, the Spurs would have to go 20 and 10 in their final 30 games of this regular season. So when we look at the Spurs and just their first 5 games with De'Aaron Fox, again, I could look at the entire season as an entire sample, but I don't want to do that because Fox has such a huge part of this team now that he's on the Spurs, both from the offense and even the backcourt defense perspective as well. And so that's why I really want to focus just on the 5 games with Fox, even though it's still just a 5-game sample size. It's very small, but that's all we can look at. Basically, that's the only data that we have. So their wins in this 5-game sample size are over the Atlanta Hawks and the Washington Wizards. The Spurs' losses during this stretch are against the Charlotte Hornets, Orlando Magic, and then, of course, the Boston Celtics last Wednesday. So when we look at where they're at, they're basically like overall numbers wise, they're basically like a minus 0.1 points per 100 net rating. So almost like right at that like average team or like 500 team. So offensively, they are 12th, scoring 117.2 points per 100, and then defensively, they're 20th, allowing 117.3 points per 100. So again, the net rating's basically right there on the margin of being a minus, but just barely is their net rating through, again, just 5 games. What we do see, though, in the 4 factors when we look at their offenses, if we look at their shooting, they're currently 12th right now in these last 5 games. So with Fox, 12th in effective field goal percentage, should I say, which ties in the 3 and the 2. One big thing we do see with Fox, though, is that their turnover percentage has definitely improved. They are currently 3rd in this 5-game sample size in turnover percentage. So we know that during the season that has been one of the issues for the Spurs on certain nights where they turn the ball over a lot. Other teams get a bunch of fast breaks or transition offense against them, and they end up losing games. So like for the season, I think they're like around league average or slightly below league average. But now with the addition of Fox, this has become a big strength for the Spurs, is taking care of the ball now that it's mainly in De'Aaron's hands, in Stephon Castle's hands, and Chris Paul's hands for the majority of the possessions as they begin, bringing the ball up the floor and getting the team into their sets. Offensive rebounding, of course, this is not a strength for the Spurs because they play smaller lineups with just Victor as the main 5. And then right now, off the bench, they only have Jeremy Sohan running the 5. So, of course, that's going to be 28th. And then free throw rate, even though, yes, Fox gets to the line a lot, and we saw him get into double-digit free throws already, and Stephon Castle gets to the line a lot, and so does Wemby at times, they're still, as a team as a whole, they're ranked 22nd right now in free throw rate. So that really hasn't been a huge strength for their offense. But that's just a quick analysis of the 4 factors on offense for the Spurs with the inclusion of Fox. Looking at their defensive 4 factors, it's the shooting for the opponent. That's really where their issue is. They're ranked 23rd right now. So again, effective field goal percentage is tying in both the 2 and the 3. And so that one right there, that number early on with Fox, with the addition of Fox, is showing to be a problem for the Spurs' defense. They have, though, increase the opponent turnover percentage. So opponents are definitely turning the ball over way more now with Fox's aggressive style of defense out there. And this is something he said he wanted to do, was bring that more aggressive style, up top, in the perimeter area with Chris Paul, Stephon Castle, those kind of wings out there and guards, being able to kind of put more pressure on the defense, knowing that they have a player like Victor there in the backcourt, or in the front court, should I say. And we see that right now. They're in these first 5 games at Fox. They are ranked 9th in opponent turnover percentage. So they are definitely applying pressure. I did an article over the weekend where I looked at, Paul, Fox, and Stephon Castle's steals and deflections numbers, and they are all, definitely increasing since Fox joined the team since February 5th. Obviously, one of the things that I mentioned about why the Spurs have been losing games lately is because of the opponent's second chance points. And so part of that is the opponent offensive rebounding. That is definitely an area of concern for the Spurs. They're 26th in that area in these last 5 games. And then the Spurs are still, even with the inclusion of Fox, they are still an elite team in not putting the opponent on the foul line. They don't foul very much, so they are first right now in these last 5 games in opponent free throw rate. And, for the season, most of this year, they've been first in that category as well. So again, they do a great job of staying disciplined and not putting the opponent on the free throw line. So really the big takeaways for defensively is the shooting for the opponent, and also the second chance points, the offensive rebounds for the opponent. So again, that's just a quick a summary of where they stand as a team since adding Fox, and we'll see which of those areas they can start to improve on in these final 30 games of the season. Now, to start discussing the players, what I really want to do is focus on the main rotation players. So I'm not going to mention players like Sandro Mamukelashvili, Charles Bassey, just because they don't always get consistent minutes, those players. So I'm going to go through the main players in the rotation that have basically been getting real minutes, whether starting or off the bench, throughout the season for the Spurs, different roles. And I'm going to begin by I'm going to start listing the players by their usage percentage according to Cleaning the Glass, and what is their percentile for their position at that usage. And then also, when I lay out the stats, I do want to warn that these are rounded numbers. So again, all the stats that I'm going to display or discuss are rounded. So if somebody's averaging like 23.8 points, it could be like I'm going to say 24 points. So basically, and for the video, for those of you that watch this on video, I will put all the stats up so you can actually see the actual numbers. But just to make it, because it's easier to say the stats in rounded form for an audio perspective, I'm going to focus on that. Okay, so let's begin with the player with the highest usage on the Spurs, and that is Victor Wembanyama. He has a usage of 29%. According to Cleaning the Glass, which is in the 95th percentile, so for his position. So again, he definitely has a huge part of the Spurs' offense. And so here are his base stats: 24 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists to 3 turnovers, 1 steal, 4 blocks in 33 minutes. His shooting splits are 48% from the floor, 35% from 3, and 84% from the foul line. We do note that he takes the most threes per game on the Spurs right now. He's also second on the team in free throw attempts. And then, of course, he leads the NBA in blocks. And so, again, right now at the All-Star break, obviously we see that these numbers that Victor is putting up is definitely, are really some really, eye-popping numbers, especially leading the league with 4 blocks, 24 and 11, a double-double each night. And we obviously see that he got rewarded for that, for his production, being named an All-Star this past weekend. And so obviously we'll see, where he if he's going to make an All-NBA is one of the other rewards he's going to be looking for, as well as Defensive Player of the Year, being on an All-Defensive team. Those are other awards to look forward to this season. Now I did see who was it? Tim Bontemps, who runs a kind of like a straw poll for the ESPN site. He kind of just asked a bunch of media voters, where players right now on the in the MVP voting, and Wemby's name, I don't know where he was on Bontemps' initial poll, but he's basically fallen a little bit. So I think it was like 8th or 7th in that polling. And part of that is that the Spurs are do have a losing record now. So I think that's going to end up, regarding where Wemby finishes out in MVP voting, it's going to be more so that the team he's on and the fact that they're not, a playoff team right now. They're kind of falling behind a little bit. But again, for the numbers that Victor's putting up, he's having a really good sophomore season so far. In year 2 so far through the All-Star break. And I do want to note, we did see some of his production go down a little bit in those last few weeks before the All-Star break. Part of that was that you could just tell in the interviews and his play on the court, he looked gassed, he looked fatigued. He has been under the weather. He mentioned that since coming back from France. So obviously, that did impact his play. But even some of those nights, he was having like 15 rebounds, 4 blocks, 30 plus points. So even under the weather, Wemby is still, incredible with the amount of production that he brings out there on the floor. All right, so now when I read De'Aaron Fox's stats, I do want to mention again that this is a very small sample size. It's just 5 games. When I talk about the base stats with him and the Spurs, so this isn't accounting the part with Sacramento that he had before. So his usage percentage is right under Wemby's at 28%. So we definitely see that they both have their share in the offense. His is at the 96th percentile for his position. He's averaging so far with the Spurs 22 points, 3 rebounds, 8 assists to 2 turnovers, 2 steals in 36 minutes. And shooting splits, he's shooting 50% from the floor, 29% from 3, and then 76% from the foul line. And we do note that since joining San Antonio, he has become the team's leading free throw attempter, getting to the line the most. And again, it's just a small sample size of 5 games. And like I mentioned last week when I did a more deep dive on Fox, I do think that, the numbers that he's putting up are very encouraging, considering that he's on a brand new team. He has this huge role in the offense where they're really depending on him for a lot. They're giving him already the ball down the stretch in crunch time when the games get into those situations. And so for him, it's more about building chemistry with his teammates, building that chemistry with Wemby. I know that in one of the recent games, they finally connected on their first alley-oop together. I think it was in the game against the Wizards. But again, for Fox, the numbers that he's putting up are pretty decent here. And, looking at the 3-point percentage, obviously, again, it's just a 5-game sample size. We know that he was shooting under like 35%, I think, before coming to San Antonio with Sacramento. But again, those numbers are pretty, pretty encouraging, just considering that he's learning an entire new team, an entire new system, entire new teammates right now, and it's just his first 5 games with the Spurs. And they haven't even had a practice together. That's something that De'Aaron mentioned as well, is that they haven't had an official practice because they were on the road when he joined the team. They were having a game basically every other night. And so again, this off time of being able to rest for the All-Star break, kind of get settled in San Antonio and then start to get some practices in, this should be encouraging for Fox's future with these final 30 games of the regular season with the Spurs. But again, you can't say anything about 22 and 8 basically each night, plus the 2 steals that he's definitely picked up that number as well. All right, the next player is the Rook, Stephon Castle. He has a usage percentage of 25%, so 72nd percentile for his position, according to Cleaning the Glass. His numbers for the season: 13 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists to 2 turnovers, 1 steal in 26 minutes. His shooting splits are 42% from the floor, 29% from 3, and 73% from the free throw line. If you want to go visit one of the pieces that I recently wrote about on the spotupshot.com, it's basically talking about Castle's scoring surge since mid-January. So when we look at from this mid-January point, it was January 13th against the Lakers, to right now, he's averaging about 18 points per game, and he's had multiple 20-point plus games during that stretch. And it's not just about him scoring more, it's also about his efficiency has really improved with his scoring of the basketball. So one, he's definitely getting to the free throw line more. At the rim, he's much more efficient about finishing, closer to the rim more efficiently. So whether that's dunking the ball on someone or finishing his layups a lot better, he's definitely improved his shooting around the rim, where it's at an above league average rate now there near the rim. And then also his 3-point shot has definitely improved over the stretch of these last 15 games for him since mid-January, where he's shooting the 3 ball much better as well. And so obviously we see that. The numbers definitely show that he's definitely becoming like basically the Spurs' third leading scorer behind Wemby and Fox. And not only that, he's learned how to do this while coming off the bench, because one of the big issues early on for him in the season was that when he was a starter, he was having these really good games of scoring wise, getting a double-digit paint scoring, getting a few 20-point games on his resume. But then when he would go to the bench, he would kind of struggle a little bit. He just wasn't as aggressive. I wouldn't say he would struggle as much. He just wasn't as aggressive, and part of it was that he wasn't getting as many minutes when he played off the bench. When now we saw in these last few weeks that he had his career high 33 points as coming off the bench, plus he had another 20-point night while coming off the bench. And as I mentioned earlier, he is one of the players who is able to get to the free throw line for the Spurs, and he's third in free throw attempts. So again, so far through the All-Star break, the rookie is definitely showing really strong signs for his first year in the NBA. Again, 13 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. And the fact that if we really take a picture of that 15-game sample size right now, he's averaging 18 points per game. So again, Castle's having a really strong start to his rookie season. Obviously, we'll see if he's able to hold this production, because he should become one of the favorites for Rookie of the Year going forward for the rest of the season if he continues to keep this level of production. Plus, he made a big name for himself this past weekend at All-Star Weekend, as I'll talk about, winning the Rising Stars MVP, and then also almost barely losing the slam dunk contest and getting to play against some of the All-Stars on Sunday. Next player is Devin Vassell. So right now he has a usage rate of 22% for his, according to Cleaning the Glass, which is in the 84th percentile according to Cleaning the Glass for his position. Now, when I looked at the his usage rate over the last few years, it's kind of close to where he's been in terms of his percentile rank. It's not too far off. So even though yes, the addition of Castle, the addition of just Wemby becoming having a larger increase in the offense, and then plus adding Fox. Vassell's still getting, his chance in the offense, whether that's shooting the ball, getting to the foul line, turning it over, getting assists, those kind of actions in the offense. He's still getting a good chunk of that based on this usage percentage. So again, we definitely see that he's still getting his opportunity. The issue probably more so is that it's just like seems like his efficiency has kind of dropped a little bit here in this season. So right now he's averaging 16 points per game, around 16 points per game, 4 rebounds, 3 assists to 2 turnovers, 1 steal in 31 minutes. And then his shooting splits, 44% from the floor, 35% from 3, and then 95% from the foul line. So again, I think that it's more so the shooting, the efficiency, especially there at the 3-point line, is where you would usually expect Vassell to have a higher number there. But again, that hasn't quite happened so far this season. And so I think that part of it is that I think now that the Spurs have added some better players to the team, the expectations are getting raised for players like Vassell, for like a player like Keldon Johnson, as I'm going to talk about, for a younger player like Jeremy Sohan, just because now that the expectations are getting elevated here for the team, and then for a player like Vassell who got a contract extension, there's like a certain, I guess, amount of production that you would expect from him to produce each night, and so he's obviously having some issues, especially with the efficiency shooting the ball, is what I'll say. And for him too, it is an adaptability issue where he's now going from being maybe last year it was Wemby and him, they were the top 2 key playmakers for the Spurs. Now all of a sudden he's now fourth basically, where it looks like it's Wemby, it's Fox, it's Castle, and now it's Vassell. And then of course if he's a starter, he's probably third now in the starting lineup of having to create for himself for others. And so again, that's just something to watch, is that it is a little bit of a new role for him so far at the All-Star break for Vassell. But again, we'll see if maybe he can pick up that 3-point shooting number, because that is one where he's going to have to get used to maybe not having as many pull-ups or actions where he has a defender near him, where more so now Fox is creating shots from Wemby's creating shots from there in the starting lineup. Similar to Vassell, Keldon Johnson is also kind of figuring things out now, kind of again facing a situation where he's no longer one of the key go-to players on this Spurs team like he was a few years ago when they were at their tanking stages. To get a player like Wemby on the roster to have one of the worst records. So again, for Keldon, it's also been kind of a transition as well, trying to figure things out with less minutes for him and also a reduced role. And so here's where his numbers are. His usage percentage is at 19%. Usage rate, so that's 65th percentile for his position. So that's definitely gone down from what he's used to for his position in prior years. He's scoring 12 points per game off the bench, 5 rebounds, 1 assist to 1 turnover, 1 steal in 23 minutes. And then his shooting splits are 45% from the floor, 30% from 3. That's kind of been an issue for him this season, is that, he's never been, a highly accurate shooter from 3, but he's definitely been better than 30%. So again, that's one thing. His 3 ball has just kind of been very inconsistent so far this season. And then 76% from the free throw line is Keldon. And then one thing we definitely see is when I mentioned that 23 minutes, that's a huge reduction for him, because he used to play, I think last season was like at 29 minutes. The year before we're like in the 30s. So that's one part of it, is that I think for these players like that have been on the Spurs for a few years now, they're foundational pieces from the past, like Keldon, like Devin Vassell, like a Jeremy Sohan. They're having to be more efficient and more productive in less time, or they're not on the court as long, or maybe their roles have definitely changed, and maybe they don't have as much hand in the offense, with the ball in their hands as they're used to getting the prior years. So again, that's been a big adjustment for a player like Keldon. So yes, he's still coming off the bench, but we do see that he has to be productive. If not, there's some games where he's barely playing. Where he's getting under 20 minutes on some nights lately. If he's not being as productive coming off the bench, and so again for him that's a huge adjustment as well. And so again that's something to look forward to. And of course he too recently a few years ago got a contract extension, and so again there's more kind of responsibility now on his shoulders to kind of have to figure things out and really produce in even his limited time that he's out there on the floor. So I just feel like there is more pressure on those players who were kind of on the Spurs prior to like Wemby and Fox and Castle joining the team. Next player is Chris Paul. So his usage rate is at 19%, which is very low. 14th percentile for his position. So again, he doesn't. Even though yes, he has a lot of part of the offense because he's bringing the ball up the floor. He's kind of getting the players into their sets. He's always communicating with them. He doesn't really like end up taking like a lot of the shots. Maybe his biggest contribution is getting those assists to the players that on the offense. So again, a lot of it he doesn't really get to the foul line either. So when we talk about usage, incorporating getting to the foul line, taking a lot of jump shots or taking a lot of shots, getting assists and turnovers, Paul's usage is very low for a player at his position. So his numbers, he's averaging 9 points, 4 rebounds, 8 assists, 2 turnovers, and 1 steal in 29 minutes. His shooting splits, shooting 41% from the floor, 36% from 3, and 95% from the free throw line. And so obviously right now it looks like with the addition of Fox, it does look like the Spurs do plan to carry out this 2-guard lineup of having Fox and Paul start. I know a lot of fans aren't very happy with that. If you ever, one thing, if you want to see what it looks like, just the commentary that comes out whenever a game's about to start is go check the Spurs' social media feeds, like their Twitter, and when they put out the starting lineups, go look at the comments, and obviously you're going to see that a lot of fans are not happy with the smaller 2-guard rotation starting the games. But data wise, it's very small sample size. It does say that they're right now numbers wise they are better with Fox and CP3 out there. But again, so right now because of where the Spurs are, I don't think that they're going to try to move this along in terms of moving on from Paul as a starter. I think that they will continue for the remainder of the season to have him starting. And of course, I know that everyone wants Stephon Castle to start, so I think that's the plan maybe for next season is to have Castle start because Chris Paul will be an unrestricted free agent. There's no guarantees that he ends up coming back to San Antonio. So Castle and Fox could be that backcourt of the future, maybe to start seeing that duo get more minutes. But again, that's kind of where CP3 is at, playing in 1 year for the Spurs at the All-Star break, 9 points, 8 assists to 2 turnovers, 4 rebounds. Again, that's kind of what I would say that's probably what you expected numbers wise from him coming into this season. Next player is Jeremy Sohan. His usage rate is at 18%. Which is in the 57th percentile for his position, so kind of like right there at league average. And that's not too far from where Sohan's been in the past, kind of in that 50th percentile has kind of been his range over the last few years with the Spurs. He's averaging 12 points per game, 7 rebounds, 3 assists to 2 turnovers, 1 steal, 1 block when rounded, and 26 minutes. Shooting 55% of the floor because a lot of his shots come from the rim. So again, his accuracy, his field goal percentage looks pretty good at 55%. 34% from threes. Again, we know that he doesn't really take many, out there. Again, 34% is not a bad number, but again, we just know that when you actually watch the games and see the volume, it's not a lot. Teams leave him open on purpose, but hey, at least he's making 34% of them now, and 72% from the foul line. And so for him too, I would just say too, it's been an adjustment where he's had to deal with some injuries. He had that early thumb injury early on the season. Then he comes back for a few games. He gets injured with the back injury, and then he's out for multiple games with that back injury. And now he's kind of still trying to find his place on the team where he's coming off the bench as the backup center. He obviously, it doesn't look like he's as comfortable with that role. He'd probably prefer to be out there as a starter alongside Victor because Victor draws a lot of attention. Sohan's able to find different cuts, guard out on the wing, guard inside. He definitely looks more comfortable, you would say, by the eye test as a starter, but the Spurs need spacing, they need shooting, so they're going to have Harrison Barnes out there because he does that role very well for the Spurs. And so again, for Sohan, this is an interesting final 30 games of the season. Here's why: because he is going to be extension eligible this upcoming summer. So again, the Spurs have a chance to extend his contract this upcoming off season, and if not, then he could play out next year and then become a restricted free agent in the summer of 2026. So again, I think that this is a very critical last 30 games for Sohan, just to see, does he find a comfortable place off the bench, or do the Spurs end up moving it back to the starting lineup? What does his production level look like in these last 30 games? Because this could be a huge part of negotiating when it comes to a contract extension. If he's not being as productive and this team can't really find a clear role for him, maybe those who knows how those negotiations go down if they happen there in the offseason for Sohan. Next up is Julian Champagnie. So his usage rate is at 15%, 42nd percentile. So again, we know that for his position. So we know that, of course, he doesn't have a huge part of the offense. Just mainly out there to provide spacing, shoot threes if he has to make some secondary decisions with the ball in his hands. So his numbers right now are 10 points when rounded, 4 rebounds, 1 assist to 1 turnover, 1 steal, and 25 minutes. And then his splits are he's shooting 42% from the floor, 36% from three and 91% from the free throw line. And so what I'll say about Julian is that, we saw that he was he was a lot more impactful and productive when he was a starter. He was getting a lot more shot attempts, just a lot more minutes, a lot more opportunity. And now as a bench player, he's kind of just coming in and not getting as many minutes at times, or he really has a small window to be productive in those games. And he really has to make the shots that he's provided with from the 3-point line. And so he's kind of his accuracy is kind of come and gone there from the 3-point line since getting off coming into the bench role. And so again, we'll kind of just see how he continues to be one of those players off the bench. I will note that who was it? I think it was Castle or somebody. I think it was Castle mentioned how with that second unit he is he is able to kind of get inside a little bit more, get to the free throw line, get into the paint. And part of it was that he says that they run a lot of 5 out on the second unit, and so Champagnie is a part of that. Even though yes, maybe he's not getting a lot of 3-point shots or he's not making them highly accurately right now, at least he's providing some spacing for a player like Castle to be able to attack inside. So there is some sort of advantage there for having Julian coming off the bench. But again, we have seen that earlier this season he was a lot more effective and productive as a starter compared to a player off the bench. All right, now the final player is Harrison Barnes. Wow, so that's interesting, right? So we see that on a nightly basis. Barnes is usually like the fourth or fifth, leading scorer on the team, really having a big impact for them. But when we see that his usage, he's really, really efficient. Again, the fact that he's last here in usage at 14% for his position, which is 37th percentile, 14% usage, that I say, and he's averaging 12 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists to 1 turnover, 0 steals when rounded, and 28 minutes. And here's why. Look at these splits. 50% from the floor. Very, very intentional and deliberate about either attacking inside or taking the three if it's there for him. 42% from three. Again, not a super high volume 3-point shooter, but if he's going to take a three, he's going to take it. It's a three he's definitely ready to take. And so he makes 42% of his threes, the best basically 3-point shooter on the team. And then 81% from the free throw line. We see that when he drives, he's able to get to the free throw line at times. And so again, that's just shows you that Barnes is very efficient in his minutes when he's out there, and his productivity level, that he doesn't really waste a lot of the offensive possessions. If he's going to take a shot, it's going to be very intentional, very deliberate, and he's doing it with a high efficiency. And so we do see that the fact that he's the last player here in usage percentage, and that he's very impactful in just the shots that he's making, or his ability to get to the free throw line or to score inside. So again, Barnes has had a pretty good season there for the Spurs, and obviously we see that he's making 42% of his threes. So again, we don't see why they would take him out of the starting lineup. So that should be his position still going forward. Let's keep going. All right, so now looking at recapping the All-Star break, just kind of what happened over the weekend. I'm just going to give a quick summary if you were able to watch some of the events that took place. So let's go to Friday. Stephon Castle was in the Rising Stars tournament, so his team won the first game, and then they advanced to the knockout round, and they ended up winning that game as well. Castle had a very good 2 games in this Friday night, where he ends up winning the Rising Stars MVP award. So again, Castle had a good Friday night. Then on Saturday, Chris Paul and Wemby participated in the skills challenge, and they got disqualified. So they tried to use a new tactic that was interesting. So what they did was when they got to the part where you have to take jump shots, you have to take like 3 shots from like the free throw line, the 3-point line, and the corner 3 or mid range. They basically just like chunked the ball to kind of just get it out, and they were just shooting for time basically. And so it's just kind of been a little bit of controversial, like where I saw some reporting saying, or someone said, one of the players that they had got clearance from the league that they could do this, but then afterward, they were told they couldn't, and then there's been some controversy about hey, Wemby put up 2 actual jump shots. It was just like a lot of craziness going on that night, and so they ended up getting disqualified, so they didn't win that night in that first skills challenge. But then later in the evening, Stephon Castle really put some pressure on Mac McClung, who ended up winning the dunk contest, where in the final round, Castle ends up advancing to the second round with McClung. And basically, Mac McClung had to get 2 perfect scores in order to beat Castle, where Castle really put pressure on him. I honestly didn't think he was going to get this dunk to go down. It just because of, he's a guard, you'd expect him to do this. So what happened was he had someone shoot a shot off the glass and it goes in the net. Well, when it goes in the net, Castle jumps in the air, he catches it and goes between the legs and dunks it. Again, it took him a few tries, but I just, visually you just see him, and he looks like when he's catching it, he's so far underneath the rim that you don't think that he's capable of doing this. And then no, he grabs the ball in the air, he puts it through his legs and smashes it through. So that was one dunk that was really impressive for Castle. Then his second one, he's driving in. He goes up with that cradle position with the ball in his right hand. He gets it behind his back, cradles it into his left hand, and then dunks it down. Again, that was a very impressive dunk. And again, he did this all while in midair. It's just something that I've only had seen in video games done before. And so again, he really put pressure on McClung, but McClung ends up winning the dunk contest with again having to get 250s there in his final two dunks to beat Castle. And then on Sunday, All-Star Sunday, Wemby's team won the Global Stars, I believe they were called. They ended up beating the Young Stars, which were like a team of like Jalen Brunson, Tyler Hero, Jaren Jackson Jr., Evan Mobley, and Jalen Williams. So they ended up winning that game. Wemby ends up winning that game. You can tell he was a lot more, definitely very aggressive in this game, really trying, definitely putting a lot of effort and energy into this game, getting some blocks, running the floor, getting some dunks there in that first game. So they win. And then Castle's team is playing the OGs, which is some of the older veteran players in the NBA All-Stars, such as Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Dame Lillard, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown, the Boston Wings. They're not they're not as old as those other players, but still they have a veteran their veteran combo. And so they end up that team the OGs ends up beating Castle's team. So then for the finals, it's Wemby's team versus the OGs, and then in that game Steph's team really took over. Steph Curry ends up getting the All-Star game MVP in that game, and so so they ended up. Steph's team ends up winning that night. And Wemby ended up losing there in the final, but again, he was very aggressive, really trying, to block shots, to make some shots from outside, get some inside looks as well, looking for his teammates. So again, Victor definitely said he was going to take it more seriously than other players have before, and we definitely saw in his effort level out on the floor in the All-Star game. Make sure to visit thespotupshot.com if you'd like. Subscribe over to the Spot Up Shot on the email newsletter. So over there, I have a piece called The Inbox where I answered 2 questions from some subscribers, where the first question was about, the De'Aaron Fox extension, as well as what happens if Luka Doncic, and the Lakers don't work out and he ends up becoming a free agent in 2026. Basically, like, what would the Spurs' path be to trying to get Luka in free agency if he ends up becoming a free agent in 2026? And then another question that was asked by a subscriber was, what do the numbers look like defensively with Fox and Castle out on the floor early on in this early 5-game sample size? So I did a big data breakdown there as well. So again, that's over on the Spot Up Shot. I had another piece that I mentioned earlier called Stephon Castle's scoring search since mid-January. And in this one, I put it down for a bunch of different numbers and charts and looked at Castle's big scoring search since that January 13th date against the Lakers. And then finally, I had another film piece called The Off Day, Fox and Wemby in the fourth quarter against the Wizards, where I took some film from that fourth quarter of Wemby and Fox and where they each scored over 30 or more points, and how they really put the Wizards away, and they really start to see that chemistry building between the two players, and how a defense really struggles to basically pick your poison. Do you want to try to stop Fox, or do you want to try to stop Victor? And so that's what we saw there in that piece. All right, so before we end this episode, let's go to preview the upcoming 3 games for the Spurs after the All-Star break. So they do resume play on Thursday. They are going to be in Austin, Texas, hosting the Phoenix Suns. So this is considered a home game for the Spurs, even though it's in Austin. The Suns right now are 26-28. They are 11th out west, and they went into the All-Star break struggling at 3-7 in their last 10 games. So for this one, because the Spurs have had a fresh break, I'm going to go ahead and go with Spurs win. Plus they should maybe get a practice in before this game. So I'm going to go ahead and say Spurs win this game. Then on Friday, the second out of back-to-back, the Spurs are still in Austin. Now they are hosting the Detroit Pistons for the first time this season. The Pistons have had a really good season so far. They are 29-26. They are 6th out east, and they are winning 6. They are 6-4 in their last 10 games. So just because of where the Pistons kind of stand right now, I'm going to go ahead and say Pistons win that one. Plus the Spurs are on the second out of back-to-back, so I'll say Pistons win that second game. And then on Sunday, the Spurs continue the rodeo road trip where they travel on the road at New Orleans against the Pelicans. The Pelicans are really struggling this year, mainly due to injuries to multiple players. So they are 13-42 this year. They are 15th out west, last out west, and they are 1-9 in the last 10 games. So I'm going to go ahead and say Spurs win this one. We saw the Spurs beat the Pelicans earlier this season in San Antonio. So again, I think that the Spurs should go 2-1 in this upcoming week. We will see what happens. And my next episode should be out on Monday, February 24th.